Before I get started, I just wanted to check all of the egos that were at the bar last night. We did get up and run 5 miles this morning, and that big crowd. Almost. So it was one where that big crowd of I'm committed. There was only one person, and she did a fantastic job running. Right. So, anyways, yes. All right, so breaking the storage barrier. In a lot of the discussions we've been having this week, highlighting some of the key components around the digital reality ecosystem. And I would say what we're going to do is spend a few minutes and kind of deep dive a little bit in this particular area. So, skip through the agenda. I mean, part of this is really centered around we are seeing the digital and physical worlds are coming together. And that is, if you go to ChatGPT or Google, is the definition of spatial computing, right? And I think, you ask yourself is, well, why is this actually taking place? Well, part of this is it's not doing digital for digital's sake. It's because we see value, right? And if I move into here, a lot of this information is not new, around where virtual facilities, digital twins, and concepts, what we're trying to continue to build off of is getting away from singular use, single development. Building an ecosystem that, quite frankly, can support multiple use cases, right? As you heard in my opening discussion around, in today, if you are traveling and utilizing, an app, there is more and more data being stitched together, right? I mean, from a standpoint of if you are in a city and you want mass transit, you can easily add that layer and quite frankly get down to where you have information on your fingers. These is where we see our employees are expecting and demanding the same experiences they have in their personal lives, what I would say in our in an industrial environment as well. One of the issues, though, is in spatial computing is that we're no longer talking about, a very small file format, right? Some of this stuff can be very large. In fact, before I get to that, when we talk about spatial computing, one of the key parts here, just like you have in your consumer experiences, is it needs to work. Telling me or putting isolation in terms of the components where people are saying, okay, you get the circle of death, you're trying to pull something up, or the user experience is like, you can really do this in the perfect environment, which none of our employees or even us are ever in, right? Or it works great in the office as soon as you go in the field, okay, it doesn't work anymore. Part of that is around, in order to make spatial computing work, you've got to make sure that everything from the infrastructure, the spatial data, as well as the applications work together. And this is the area where, quite frankly, the performance of the entire stack is critical. Because this will determine whether or not it's actually getting used or not. I mean, look, in our experience throughout this, we've had examples where, cool consumption tools have been, issued and put out into the field, only to find themselves under the desk. And they find themselves under the desk because the performance of the entire stack is not meeting the expectations, or it gets down to where our employees would be like, look, I can just use my iPhone for that, right? I mean, why? I have all this activities here that, I don't need anything fancy. This works. That stuff, Michael, you deployed is not working, right? So performance is critical in terms of supporting these use cases. So when you start talking about large file formats, it's interesting. Even this presentation, we were collaborating with ARC, and guess what? ARC can't handle anything over greater than 10 megabytes. So we couldn't even collaborate on this presentation because there's some imagery in here that created a whole mess going back and forth. But if you look at your cameras today, in terms of imagery, like getting a 4 or 5 megabyte picture, or 7, I don't know what the minimum is now on your camera, 7, something like that. But if you use something as simple off the shelf, like a Polycam, right, to get a 3 or a Lumina, a 3D image from an activity, you're quickly into the 50 megabyte type activities. That's not something that you're just going to flip over to an email, right? If I were to do a basic scan, I can get scans anywhere from 50 gigabytes up to a terabyte. Try emailing that to somebody, right? Or if I'm doing a 3D model in an engineering tool, anywhere from a gigabyte to 50 gigabytes, in terms of the work we're going on. The spatial computing in terms of the performance, given the size, this is an area where we, as an industry, need to figure out how we're going to streamline the user experience. Because if you get it to where large file formats are not deliverable to the end user, then quite frankly, you're not getting the value of the technology that's out there, right? So when we share, I've already mentioned, sending an email back and forth, 10 to 20, 25 megabytes if you're lucky. I don't know, actually, that's clearly not our system. I think it dies at 10. And then even some of the, web share files, right? How many people have experience with the web share files? Log in, going through all that stuff. How many people have the patience to continue to do that? My team should be raising their hand because I don't, right? So, right? But I think this is the area where, and as part of these large files, this is where the other factor comes in, bandwidth. How many of you have tried to upload an image or a large file to watch your bandwidth go up and down, and then at the very end get to file corrupt? It didn't fully load, right? Because you're looking at a size of something and you're trying to move it around, and you'll get into issues where, in some of these scans, where there are literally hundreds of files. Is it you have somebody click and drag every single one? Or is it an area where you can click it and forget it in terms of it's uploaded in the background, right? To me, these are all the actual experiential impacts of our users, our administrators, of expanding the spatial computing platform, right? Multiple versions, and I would say that even with this presentation, I think we were on Rev 10, back and forth. And doing that in a large file format is really difficult because there wasn't a great place to actually collaborate with files of this size, right? Inability to search and share. How many people can, from an image standpoint, have files and files of just something simple, JPEGs, right? Oh, we took a picture of that. It's in this directory. Let me sort through, or how many pictures do you actually open up to go see, is there a picture of what you're looking for before you get to just go take another picture, right? In our environment, because some of those activities take place, that's what's created part of our problem. As you saw my team share earlier, some of the imagery with the spaghetti bowl over the baby's head, that is some of the frustration to where people did not know that we actually had 3D assets or scans. And so what did they do? Let me just go take another one. Let me go get it because I know how to do that, and I know when it comes, it'll come to me, and I don't have to share that with somebody else. So all of that frustration, and I'm really sad to report that in this technology age, the most common way for sharing is using snail mail. It is literally taking hard drives, sending them around. Look, I have examples where we actually took computers and laptops after the imagery. It's like, just ship the whole laptop, right? It's one of those where I'm humbly going, yeah, we've done that. We've done that many a times, unfortunately, right? But the bottom line impact of a lot of that is that if you're shipping a hard drive or shipping a computer, the likelihood of how many use cases you are supporting with that imagery is one. A single use. You're not building something on top of it because you're into a capability that you cannot share with others. So, do you think this is only an energy industry problem? No, and I think it's an area where this survey actually came from the media and entertainment. As I've shared before, some of the engagements we are fortunate to have. We went to it was a media and entertainment studio, and they were working on imagery for a movie that was coming up. And literally, we said, "Man, this is fantastic in terms of the 3D content, the rich anime that was put together." It's like, how do you actually share that with everybody? And literally, they pulled out a drawer of hard drives with little 3M stickers on the top of it that said Project 1, Project 2, right? I mean, it's even worse than the looking at your share file, right? So we went to the defense industry and had the same discussion around, hey, how are you guys actually sharing this rich content, et cetera? And it came back again, well, it's one of those where it's on a hard drive, we kind of move it around, really identifying what we think is that across the board, as part of that overall end-to-end, there's a slight missing gap in order to enable that performance. So, we've mentioned this, and if you learned nothing from coming to ARC this year, I want you to walk away with MTTR, right? We've said it a couple of times, and I think it's important because what it is really doing is recognizing the importance of the UX of this entire stack. Mean time to reality, right? Or, C to C, capture to consumption. We really need to be measuring from a user experience how long it takes to get there. As I mentioned during the keynote, how useful would Waze be around you have a speed check, speed trap, whatever you're going to say. How useful would that be if that was 4 days old, right? Somebody was going to go capture that, give it to you as a driver. It's probably not very useful, right? Dynamic capability to interact with these things is a critical parameter in terms of supporting use cases. Like I said, if you're interested in solving one use case, go ahead and ship the hard drive, right? If you are looking at a foundation that you can build on top of, then mean time to reality is going to be a critical KPI that your team, whether they decide to measure it or your users will tell you afterwards that in terms of their experience. So, reducing this duration from capture to consumption really accelerates what I would say, capability of building more and more use cases on top of it. And yes, data sovereignty, critical. In this space, in terms of assets, making sure that you have control of your assets in your security is a key aspect. Contextualization of 3D. It's kind of funny because a lot of times when we are saying we're contextualizing stuff, we say, yes, 3D. But no, now I'm talking about contextualization of 3D assets. Like, can you actually find them? Do you know how many terabytes of information you have of your 3D or 3D scans, CAD models, drawings, etc.? The ease of distribution and collaboration, internal and external. Being able to share across the globe with your EPCs, other suppliers and vendors is a critical component. And this is what we believe is when this moves the arrow to where mean time to reality shrinks, you're going to be able to support multiple use cases on top of this. And what's the beauty about that? And our belief is that the more use cases you support, quite frankly, the easier it's going to be to sustain the concept and the backbone. So, again, a lot of people have seen this imagery over and over again around agnostic capture, store, deliver, and consume. Well, the bottom line is, as I'm illustrating here, MTTR is measuring the performance of the entire stack, right? That is absolutely critical in terms of being able to do that. So what is it that is key to this solution? It's a customer-owned geospatial data lake. Now, before people jump to this, I'm not talking about blob storage. I'm not talking about some SharePoint or ShareFile. I'm talking about a contextualized experience of your 3D assets so you know where, what, and when those 3D assets actually exist. This is the work that I would say that we are doing some really step out work with our partner at AWS to really make sure that, quite frankly, as much as we are having this discussion around agnostic, being able to apply multiple suppliers and to interact with this platform is a critical part of the success of ExxonMobil's digital reality ecosystem. Thank you.